Grenada's opposition doesn't about turn in its position on the CCJ. That's our top story in Caribbean Newsline for Thursday, November 8th. From the CMC News Center in Bridgetown, I'm Nicole Best. Good evening. The National Democratic Congress, the NDC in Grenada, has done an about-face on the recently held referendum to replace the London-based Privy Council with the Caribbean Court of Justice, the CCJ, as the island's final appeal court. In a press conference on Thursday, senior NDC member Claudette Joseph said the party was deeply saddened and depressed with the outcome of the referendum in which Grenadians voted against the switch. During the CCJ education campaign leading up to the referendum, Joseph was openly opposed to the yes vote, saying that people who did not understand why they were voting should vote no.
But we believe that everything must be above board, that no traps must be set to ambush people. If you're invited to be part of an advisory committee, you expect the committee to be what its name says, advisory. If they want you to join a yes committee, be open about it and say join a yes committee. The NDC wishes to reiterate that we continue to support the Caribbean Court of Justice in both its original and appellate jurisdictions. However, what transpired on Tuesday was a very sad chapter in the history of Grenada and the Caribbean. It was a missed opportunity. It was scuttled simply because of the customary infusion of partisan politics in a matter that was supposed to transcend the green-yellow divide in Grenada.
And that was NDC's interim leader Joseph Andel reiterating that the party was never in support of the yes vote, but acknowledges the country missed an opportunity to embrace the regional court. We now go to the insert from Claudette Joseph.
The CCJ itself is not something that will attract the interests of many people because they're not connected with it. The average Grenadian will not ever take a court to either the Privy Council or the CCJ, right? It is few cases that go there. In the 45 years we've been independent, only 15 cases, right, have gone to the Privy Council from Grenada. And that wouldn't be much more when you get to the CCJ. It might increase a little bit. In the case of Barbados, I think they have like 3 times as many. So let's say 15 trees are what? 45. 45. So, and we 45 years. So let us say CCJ, you're talking about still 1 case a year, right? So the reality is it is not something that the average man will feel connected with because it's not impacting you, you're not going to use it. Most people are satisfied with what the High Court decides, or if they're going to Court of Appeal, they're satisfied there and they don't go. And so all this thing about cheaper and access, that was just honestly not true. It's just not true. People would have found that if they voted yes, people would have found that they vote yes and they still can't access the court because it's still too expensive. And that's where, as we say in Grenada, I take knock with some of the people who are telling the public that because it just wasn't true.
Interim leader Joseph Andel said that despite the 2 failed attempts to accede to the CCJ, he hopes that this is not the end of the road for Grenada and the Caribbean Court of Justice. Prime Minister Dr. Keith Mitchell has already said he will not initiate another referendum on the issue. Meantime, Antigua and Barbuda's former Attorney General Justin Simon, QC, says he's even more disappointed about the referendum outcome in Grenada than he is about the result in his own country. And that's because it's the second time Grenadians rejected the regional court, having voted on several pieces of constitutional reform legislation, including a CCJ bill in 2016.
I believe we have lost the vision and commitment of our forebearers. But nevertheless, I do not think that we should throw up our hands in the air, those of us who voted yes, nor should we bury our head in the sand. I think this is a time for recommitment. And to that extent, I am disappointed in the Prime Minister's declaration that he would no longer pursue or continue with constitutional reform. I think all the more reason why we should engage ourselves in constitutional reform, education, and conferences, so that people will get educated and will understand the need for that change in our national pursuits, and for us to be a better place when next that issue comes up for decision.
And despite Antigua and Barbuda's Prime Minister Gaston Brown's position that he will not be undertaking another CCJ referendum, Simon is urging those who support the CCJ not to throw in the towel. The Queen's Counsel says while it may take a while before another referendum is held again, the matter should be addressed within the wider issue of constitutional reform.
And you know what is alarming, and really one must say that it's also laughable, because one of the issues in the former referendum in Grenada was the issue of appointing a leader of the opposition if there has not been an election or for any member of the other party. People voted no, and right after that you had a general election, and Grenada right now has no leader of the opposition. No member of the opposition party won their seats. So it is ironical and cynical when we realize after the fact that this is something that we should have gone for. And I think it's going to happen, we're going to have that very same feeling if tomorrow Great Britain decides we no longer want that financial burden because it is of no concern to us, and you people in the Caribbean address your own judicial matters. And I believe the time will come if we do not act.
Well, earlier, CMC's Peter Richards spoke with pollster and Director of the Caribbean Development and Research Services, Peter Wickham, on the rejection of the CCJ by both Antigua and Barbuda and Grenada. He started by asking about the Grenada opposition's claim that it's saddened and depressed over the outcome of the referendum.
If you recall, the NDC was supportive initially. Last minute, the NDC said that they were opposed to it, and they discovered this on the day that the special officers started to vote, and now they've taken a position that they are opposed to it, that they're sorry that it didn't work out. And I think that, as you said, the only thing we conclude is that the organization is not serious, and I think it, in a sense, lends support to the action taken by the people in the last election in not electing a single one of them, because one wonders how someone could be so possessed by politics that they can be making these kinds of movements to and fro in a way that they're not understanding that the public is actually watching and paying attention, and really wondering whether these people are seriously committed to the development of Grenada.
But we saw that response also coming out from Antigua, where the referendum was also held in Antigua at the same time as Grenada. One, the opposition leader in Antigua says it's a referendum on the policies of the Prime Minister. And here we have what's occurring in Grenada. You're saying that, for example, the rejection is a question of losing ground. It's not a reflection that the ruling party is losing ground in Antigua. Definitely not.
And I made the point that in both Grenada and Antigua, you're dealing with very strong governments that both have 59% public support. My sense is if an election was called tomorrow, people would reflect on the inability of the opposition to marshal their forces behind a serious position and support them. And I suspect that the level of support that they have now is probably even further reduced because both oppositions are in a mess. To not be able to come to a clear position on a referendum, in the case of Grenada, I think it speaks volumes. The sad thing, and I think what is happening now, Peter, is that those people who voted against it unfortunately are uncomfortable being categorized in the very negative way that they have been categorized. The NDC is supposed to have a revolutionary past. They're supposed to be a progressive organization, and they're uncomfortable as being seen as being on the side of the colonialists. I suspect that we're going to hear similar machinations from the UPP shortly because they're saying they're unhappy. the fact that this has ground reform to a halt. But ultimately, the oppositions have to take full responsibility for the fact that in Grenada, this is the second time that reform has been tried and it hasn't worked out, and they're saying they want reform to go forward. The fact is that if you cannot agree on a simple thing like a CCJ, which should be an obvious yes for everyone, then how can you tackle the larger issues? So I entirely understand Dr. Mitchell's position in saying that this is it for reform. I understand Prime Minister Brown's position in saying that he will focus on other priorities because we can't seem to get it right. And I think that the oppositions have to take full responsibility. This last-minute change of heart, if you felt that way before, you would have supported it when it was offered.
But do you think that the ruling parties in both Grenada and Antigua and Barbuda made a mistake in saying from day one they wanted it to be non-partisan?
I wonder. I think that the idea of being non-partisan was an attempt to deal with the reaction that Dr. Mitchell got before when he was told it was too partisan. An attempt to deal with the reaction that Dr. Gonzalez received when he went in 2009 and was told it was too partisan. The fact is that the partisan approach has been tried and that seemed to have failed. I think that what they were trying was a non-partisan approach. When failure seemed imminent, then the partisanship, certainly in the case of Antigua and Barbuda, last minute it came in. And then again, it didn't work out. Frankly, I think what you will have is an opposition lying in wait and using its power to frustrate this process at every turn of the way. And I think whether it's partisan or non-partisan, ultimately people have to understand that a partisan political process or a political process is what will get the CCJ passed. A political process is what got it passed in all of the other countries that have it, and a political process is needed to get it passed in these countries. So the fact that you have a referendum, there's no obligation for a referendum to be seen in a partisan political way. If a politician and a leader supports it, he supports it because it's a good thing. It's not necessarily a party political issue because you can vote against a government and then support a referendum because you support the CCJ. And that's the black and white it needs to be brought down to. Let's pull away all of the tissues and the confusion and all of the ridiculous objections that we're hearing from some sections of the opposition groups. And let's deal with it as it is. Either we want a CCJ or we don't want a CCJ.
Do you see, what then do you see for the rest of the Caribbean? The CCJ was established as far back as 2001. You've seen what occurred this week regarding the referenda. What next? What happens?
My sense is that this may very well act to give it some energy because I think the conversation in both places has isolated the extent to which people who do not support it are essentially supporting a very backward, non-independence approach to Caribbean development. And my hope is that against that background, we will get some energy from Jamaica, some energy from Trinidad and Tobago, some energy from maybe St. Lucia, and places that do not require a referendum. And I think that if that happens, if we have another large population like Jamaica or Trinidad coming on board, it will give the CCJ energy. And I think it will further isolate the areas or the countries in which the referendum is necessary, and it will isolate forces that were opposed to it, and hopefully it could bring them on board. Because I'm convinced that if we had government and opposition standing shoulder to shoulder, that this CCJ could be pulled through. But the oppositions have to grow up, they have to be more mature, and they have to stop using this as an opportunity to punish a government for their own failures at the elections in the election before.
And still to come in Caribbean Newsline, Jamaica's opposition warns of a crisis in the management of the island's energy sector. Stay with us. There's more news after the break.
Carnival in a metas and sleep. We couldn't wait to jump in the street. 365 every dog in the heat.
Jamaica's opposition People's National Party, the PNP, is calling on Prime Minister Andrew Holness to appoint a minister to head the science, energy and technology portfolios now, saying the energy sector is in crisis. Holness has been in charge of the ministry since Dr. Andrew Wheatley's removal more than 2 months ago. At a press conference on Wednesday, the PNP said nothing has happened since. TVG's Hillman Green reports.
When former Energy Minister Dr. Andrew Wheatley was removed from that position amid accusations of nepotism, the portfolio was moved to the office of the Prime Minister. However, opposition spokesman on energy Philip Paulwell says under the Prime Minister, the sector seems to be in free fall.
I don't believe that the Prime Minister has done a good job because he can't. The Prime Minister's office is already overburdened by so many other portfolios. We have not had a single meeting of the Energy Council since 2016, so both Minister Wheatley and himself have failed in that.
The Energy Council was set up with support from both parties to advise the minister. But in addition to that, Mr. Paulwell listed no new renewable energy projects since the 2013-14 projects, and those should be completed soon.
Nothing has been said by this government of this, and we stand to lose the gains that we have made.
Also, the Vacuum Distillation Unit, VDU project at Petrojam, which seeks to reduce production of heavy fuel oil, HFO, was to be completed before the JPS's new LNG plant comes online.
I warn again that if this project is not done and done within time, Petrojam will not continue to be viable.
He also questioned the status of the program to improve efficiency at the JPS as a means of reducing energy costs to consumers, and the reviews that were supposed to be conducted into public funds risks with Petrojam operations. Collectively, Mr. Paulwell says that's why the opposition is now sounding the crisis alarm.
We need to get some updates, and I again don't believe that the Prime Minister has the competence in himself and the office to deal with this energy portfolio. It needs a specialized minister.
And ahead in Newsline Sport, Jamaica government to honor the women's football team for qualifying for next year's World Cup. Stay with us. Sport is next.
This hurricane tip comes to you compliments the Caribbean Disaster Emergency Management Agency and the Caribbean Media Corporation. Be prepared. Before the hurricane, protect your windows. Permanent shutters are the best protection. A low-cost approach is to put up plywood panels.
Come and experience exceptional fun, meet amazing people, enjoy fantastic food, and rock the nights away to world-class music at the 23rd Annual St. Kitts Music Festival. 3 nights of musical entertainment from the 27th to the 29th of June 2019. Book now and save the date. For more information, log on to stkittsmusicfestival.net. St. Kitts Music Festival, an experience like no other.
Progress. We definitely have progress here. I mean,
but that's who they are.
Well, I don't.
I hate to tell you that. Some of it.
No, listen. I think the majority of men.
That's all they know.
Listen, I
for the
think
few,
the
that's what
majority
they
of men
know.
are okay, right? But there are those who are abusive towards women, who do things that they're not supposed to do. But the majority of men are okay.
Thank you.
I mean, come on. I love the guys. It's all good.
Okay, thanks.
The Jamaica government wants to celebrate the Reggae Girls' qualification for the 2019 FIFA Women's World Cup. Sports Minister Olivia Grange highlighted a number of activities planned in honor of the region's first women's team to qualify for a World Cup. And as we also hear in this report from TVG's Simon Preston, Jamaica's football boss believes the Reggae Girls will be a force to be reckoned with in France.
October 17, 2018 is a date that will be remembered forever, as it was the day the Reggae Girls became the first Caribbean team to qualify for a FIFA Women's World Cup. With this accomplishment, the Ministry of Sport is in talks with the Jamaica Football Federation to get all 20 players who competed in the CONCACAF Women's Championship on the island for a celebration. Minister Grange gave an idea of when this will be.
We're looking at celebration possibly in December. and it will be over a weekend span. We're looking at a motorcade tour to certain locations in Kingston and St. Andrew and St. Catherine. We're looking at visits outside of the KMA as well.
Minister Grange said more details would be coming in a press release regarding the exact dates for the celebration. Meanwhile, head coach of the senior reggae girls, Hugh Menzies, is grateful for the attention the girls will receive later this year.
I've been begging, what is Jamaica going to do for us? So, you know, with this meeting with the minister, it's going to be an enlightenment for them when we get back to them and say, hey, this is what's planned, so they can get involved with their communities, their families, and, you know, have a brilliant holiday before they get back into the nick of things.
Menzies is hopeful the qualification will inspire young girls in Jamaica to progress forward with football.
Creates an awareness for our young girls to look up to these players, and then get something in place to help develop a league. That 3 months is not enough. Now we need to sit down and say, let's look at 8 months, because we have the talent here. We have the talent. We just have to create an infrastructure that's going to help matriculate that talent moving forward. But
President of the Jamaica Football Federation, Michael Ricketts, agrees.
Football, and both male and female football, can be that change to effect as part of nation building, to inspire some young person, whether male or female, to just change your focus. And I want to implore the powers that be that here's an opportunity to use these young ladies, like I've said, for the agent for social change in this country.
Ricketts also has high expectations of the team to succeed in France.
I do believe that these girls will not just go to France because we are qualified for the World Cup. We're going to be competitive. We're going to beat some teams. And again, we're going to make this country very proud.
Staying in Jamaica, where that country's under-20 team pulled off a draw against CONCACAF giants Mexico in the World Cup qualifiers in Florida. TVJ's Denise Walters reports.
In the top-of-the-table clash, Mexico started the game on a brighter note, forcing Jadine White to save as early as the 13th minute. And 8 minutes later, their early pressure paid off as Diego Lainez's curler found the head of Javane Brown, which resulted in an own goal. In the second half, the young Jamaicans found their footing, and in the 61st minute, Leonardo Gibbinson got the equalizer, making it 1-1. But 5 minutes later, Mexico won a penalty, and those Juan Marcellas put the young El-Tri back in front. In the 71st minute, Jamaica showed their tenacity and class as Tariq McGee scored a screamer to draw the game level, and that's exactly how the contest ended.
Well, I mean, it's a delightful feeling. I mean, me and my teammates have been working really hard for this. We didn't get enough time to prepare, but however, I think the lads came out and they performed today.
This was now the third time Jamaica avoided a defeat to Mexico at CONCACAF Under-20 tournament after their previous results in 1986 and 2001. Both teams are level on 7 points, but Mexico leads the group with a +11 goal difference compared to Jamaica's +4. Up next, the young Reggae Boys will face Aruba on Thursday.
We'll have to go into the games and try to score as much goals as possible, because we know in Mexico are at the top, but they have more goals than us, so yeah, we have to score more goals.
While group leaders Mexico will oppose Grenada at the same venue. Only the top team will advance to the qualification stage of the tournament at the end of the group stages.
Meanwhile, Barbados winless streak continued in the qualifiers as they went down to St. Lucia 2-1 recently. More in this CBC Sport report.
Down the line, crosses into the box. It's going to be loose. The shot is put in the back of the net. St. Lucia have taken the lead. He's onside. He rounds the keeper, and he puts it into the side of the net. Golden opportunity to double the game for Barbados. We do have a substitution to come in as Deshaun Howell for Barbados. It's into the box. Francis, the substitute. He puts it in the back of the net. And look at that. Ray Francis, who came on just a minute ago, levels the game at 1. Knocked out of play, but it's a penalty on the follow-up shot, saying someone from Barbados pulled him down. Here's Sebastian Ribot. He shoots. He scores as he retakes the lead for St. Lucia 2-1. Barbados unable to find the back of the net a second time. St. Lucia does, and they win it 2-1.
And that's the sport. Stay with us. We'll be right back.
We are anti-NATO. NATO is not a force for freedom and democracy defending the underdog, as I recently heard the senior politicians say. But NATO is a nuclear-armed military alliance, aggressive, expansionist, with a global agenda, and its laws and interventions, as we've heard today, have been nothing short of a disaster.
Again, the major developments of this day. Grenada's opposition does an about turn in its position on the CCJ. And in sport, the Jamaica government announces plans to celebrate the Reggae Girls qualification for the 2019 FIFA Women's World Cup. That's Caribbean Newsline. For news and sport around the clock, subscribe to CarnaNews.com. For more of our programming, log on to CaribVision.tv and check out our YouTube channel. We'll be back here again tomorrow. But from all of us at CMC News, thank you for joining us and do have yourselves a good night.